So welcome back from spring break. Hope everybody had a good chance to rest and hopefully get back into it. Just want to make sure that the sound is working here. Just a second. Yep. Okay. All right. So we left it off last. Now remember, this is 2 weeks ago that we were working on Jdbc because we had the review on last Thursday, and then we had a week of break. So I wanted to remind ourselves what we were working on, and then we'll go ahead and finish off what we were working on. When you were working with Jdbc, Java Database Connectivity API, you want to programmatically connect to your database through Java, pull results, process that data, do whatever you're going to do with it, right? You also want to be putting stuff into your database through Jdbc, through Java. And so we demonstrated some of that. The same basic process here as basically opening a file. Open a file, process a file, close the file. So you create a connection to your database. You'll need a username, URL, and password. You create and prepare your statement. You prepare the statement, and then you execute it. And if it's a select statement, you expect results back. And you get this thing called a result set. And then you have to process that result set. If it's an insert or an update or a delete statement, then you just execute the query and you're done with it. You don't expect anything back. Right? Then you process your results, whatever that may mean, and you clean up after yourself. You close your resources. Remember that failure to close your resources may mean that you eventually run out of connections. You only have up to 30 persistent connections to the CSE server. Once you've hit your limit, that's it. It'll reject any more requests for additional connections. So let's remind ourselves what we were doing last time. We have this film database, remember? We've got films, we've got actors, right? I show tables here. We've got an actor table, a director table, a film table, and then a film actor table, which gives us a many-to-many relationship so that one actor can appear in multiple films. One film can have multiple actors, okay? And I've got my workbench open here so that we can go ahead and formulate our queries. What we did last time is we did a couple of data loading activities where we got a director by a particular ID, right? We got a director by their name, right? And so we formulated queries that looked like select everything from director where last name is equal to this and the first name is equal to that. We process we execute the query, process the results, etc. What we started working on last time and we didn't get through, and this is where we'll pick it up now, is that we wanted to load up all of the films. We got it to a point where we were selecting out the relevant data, in this case, film ID, the director ID, and title from the film. And then we were also pulling up the director here, and then we used that function that we already wrote to get the director information so that we could create this film here. Now, if I just run this as is, right? Let me go ahead and run it right now. You'll see that it's connecting to the database, and it's pulling all the films. The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Inception's directed by Christopher Nolan. Star Wars by George Lucas, right? But we don't have any of the actors yet, right? So that's where we're going to pick it up now. Let's go ahead and load up all of the actors. We already created the film objects. We simply just need to load up all the actors associated with each film and then add them to the cast, okay? So let's take a look at our tables here again. The film actor table is what brings those two tables together. So let's formulate our query for one particular film. Right? Let's go ahead and select everything from films first of all. Film. Right? And we see, let's do Batman here with film ID of 10. Okay. Let me zoom in so that we can see this. There we go. All right. So let's select all of the actors that are associated with that film. To do that, I'm going to have to start at the actor table. Right? Select everything from actor A, and then I'm going to have to do a join to that join table in between. Do I need to do a left join or a right join? Left join, film actor A, actor FA on A dot actor ID is equal to A or A FA dot actor ID. Right? Let's go ahead and just execute that query really quickly here. Right? If I do a left join, I get somebody like Harrison Ford that is not actually enrolled in any films, right? Is acting in any films, at least according to our database here, right? Do I want that kind of data here? Right? No, I want everybody that is in a particular film. If they're not in any films, then there won't be any film actor records in between. So I don't need to do a left join, or I just need to do a regular old join. And then I want to do it for a particular movie. So where film ID is equal to, say, Batman, which was 10. Now, is this going to work? Well, this will work, right? But why did it work? Because there was only one film ID, right? The film ID here is in the film actor table. So if you want to be more intentional, it should be fa.filmid. There we go. And now I get Robert Pattinson, and Paul Dano. Remember that Robert Pattinson, we gave him 2 roles here. Okay, we might have to handle that some way, right? Okay. Do I need all of that data, by the way, in order to say that Robert Pattinson is in the Batman? No. In fact, should I be pulling all this data across the wire and wasting bandwidth and wasting bytes going across the wire? Probably not. Let's be more intentional about this. Let's not use a wildcard. Let's go ahead and use a.firstname, right, first name, and a.lastname, right? And did we want anything else? Maybe the role, but I don't think that I've implemented the role over here in the actor class, right? Or in the, where would we even do that, right? If I did it in the actor class, does an actor play the same role in every single film that they star in? No. Sounds like it's a combination of when somebody stars in a particular film, just like it is in the join table, they have this particular role. So maybe we want to take care of that in the film class. Right now I've got a list of actors. Maybe I could have a list of film actors and yet another Java class to model that if I wanted to. Right? I'm not going to go that far though. All right. So the first name, last name is probably good enough. Right? Let's go ahead and take this and put it into our JDBC code over here. So for each film, what I want to do is execute that query. So let's go ahead and create that query. And I think I've already used the keyword, the variable name query. So let's go ahead and name it what it is, film actor query. Right? And I'm going to put that query in here. Right? All I did was a cut and paste. If you want to make it line up and nice and look nice, get rid of those end line characters, of course. You can go ahead and do that, or you can put it in one long line and then let it reformat it for you. Do I want it for always? Do I always want to do this for the Batman? Film ID 10. Nope. So let's change it to question mark. Remember the question marks? Those are the parameters that get set when you prepare your query. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and for each film, I'm going to execute this query. Before I do that, let's go ahead and prepare it just once. Create a prepared query here just once. How did we do that up here? There's a prepared statement and a result set that I've already created. I'm just going to reuse those. Right? Actually, if I'm going to reuse them, what should I do with them after I'm done with them? rs.close and ps.close. All right, and then I can reassign them. ps is equal to con.prepare statement, just like we did up here, and execute query. rs is going to be execute query. There we go. Now, do I need to re-prepare this for every single time, for every single film? Film 1, prepare your query. Film 2, prepare your query. Film 3, prepare your query. No, I only have to do it once. Right, and we'll surround this with a try catch here in a second. But I only have to do it once, and then I reset the parameters on each loop here. So once it's been prepared, I can say ps.set, and it's going to be an integer or a string, or what should I set that parameter to? Set int, okay. And which one is it going to be? Do we start at 0? It's going to be f.get film ID, right? I want to set this one and only query. Remember, how does JDBC use its parameterizations? Does it start like at 0, like an array? Nope. Where does it start? At 1. Right? So get rid of this. I only have to prepare it once. I do have to surround it with a big try catch, though. And just to take care of that, I'm just going to go ahead and surround it right now. There we go. And then there's my catch at the bottom. There we go. Cannot get data for some reason, whatever. All right. So I set every loop here in this for loop, every iteration of this for loop is going to reset it to that particular film, right? This film's film ID. Then we can go ahead and execute that query and get a result set back. That result set, in particular, is going to look something like this for that first film. It's going to be Robert Pattinson, and Paul Dano. Right? So let's go ahead and process that result set while rs.next. Why do we use this pattern? What does the result set do? If I've got say three results here, where does the result set start? Its pointer or cursor or whatever you want to call it, before the first record. rs.next will go to the first record. rs.next will go to the next record. Next record. What happens when there's no more records to process? It returns false, breaking you out of this loop. So, true, next, true, 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 false. That's when you break out of this loop. Okay? For each one of these, you pull out whatever pieces of data you want. So rs.getString, right? And the string that I want is the first name. I'll store that into a variable called first name. String first name is equal to, oops, there we go. And then I'll get the last name. There we go. And last name. And then I'll create an actor based on that data. So actor A is equal to new actor. And now I'm going to have to look at the constructor for that, for how I designed it. Let's take a look at that constructor. Can I do it with just a first name and a last name and that's it? Not the way that I've designed it. Right? What could I do? What are some options here? I could add another constructor where I just have the first name and last name. Right? Or what else could I do? Pull the actor ID at the same time. rs.getInt. And that will be the actor ID. There we go. And then I can put all of those in to create a new actor. Actor ID. What was the order? First name, last name? First name, last name. And then I'm going to add that actor to the film's cast. f.addActorA. There. Everything gets closed up down here, and I return that list of films that now has all actors associated with it. Let's try it. And it's not going to work. Parameter index out of range. Number of parameters is 0, right? And we have 1. So let's go ahead and take a look at that error. Right? That error was rethrown right here. It was a product of where is the actual set int. There we go. Nope, I don't want that. What line number? An R code. 181. There we go. All right, there we go. Oh, okay, I see what my mistake was. I should have paid attention to the warnings. Which query did I prepare? The query up there. Right? Which query should I have prepared? This query right here. Right? There we go. It should still fail. I meant it to fail, but I meant it to fail in a different way. So let's see what the failure is now. There we go. Column actor ID is not found. Did we pull the actor ID in the original query that we wrote over here? Nope. So let's do that now. A.actor ID. Right. And just make sure that it works. Great. And change it over here. A.actor ID. Now this should work. I'm crossing my fingers. And it does. So we've got the Batman starting Robert Pattinson twice because he has 2 roles. How do we take care of that? Right, that's a design decision that I'll leave to you. Cloverfield starring nobody because we don't have any records for it. Inception starring Leonardo DiCaprio. Star Wars starring Carrie Fisher. And Eraserhead starring nobody here. Right? So now I'm pulling all that data. It worked because there was only one actor ID in my query. What if I had pulled everything? In addition to wasting resources, there are now going to be 2 actor IDs, right? Oh, it ends up working, right? But if I did that over here, what would it look like? Oops. There we go. I don't want to save. There. There's an actor ID right here and an actor ID right here. They happen to be the same thing, but that's because of my join. What's a better way of doing that, maybe? Don't select everything. Let's undo that. Only be intentional and use aliases as actor ID. First name as first name. And then you can break it up even further if you want to. Select actor as actor ID, align everything up really nicely. Last name as last name from actor. You can line it however you want, right? Again, white space doesn't generally matter. If you want to, you can use a more modern Java and have a multi-line. I don't think that I've got the right version of Java installed here, but you can use a multi-line string. Multi-line string, in fact, I can show you what it might look like. String foo is equal to, I think it's 3 quotes. And then you can put whatever you want in here on any number of lines. Right? Oh, okay. I do have the right Java installed. So you can have multi-line strings. This is Java, I believe, 17 or 18. So you need to have the right Java for this. Do not rely on it because I don't know if that's what's installed on CSE. Question. So, yeah, question? A.actor ID as actor ID? What do you mean? Oh, this one? This one looks okay, right? Oh, I see what you're saying. In the result, the A dot would be gone, but within your query, you can still use A dot. You can still use the alias of the table. I'm only aliasing this after it's been pulled and then after it's been used on the query. Okay. All right. That pretty much takes care of pulling stuff out. What about putting stuff in? All right. So I want to insert a film record here. What do I need to insert a film record? Select everything from film. What is required here, the way that we design this? I think, or let's describe film, since it's been 2 weeks since we designed this table, maybe more, right? So do we require, if I'm going to create a brand new film record, do we require a film ID? Nope, that's auto-generated by the database. We do need a title because it's not allowed to be null. Do we need a release date? No, because it's allowed to be null. We don't need an IMDb rating because it's allowed to be null. We do need an EIDR because it is not allowed to be null, but we can just go ahead and make that up. And what else do we need? A director ID. So we need we need a title, an EIDR, and a director ID in order to be able to insert a record. Let's go ahead and write that query now. Insert into film. What is it? Title, EIDR, and director ID. Values. And then let's just go ahead and put in a test value here. Test, or I don't know, give me a movie. Give me an actual movie. Suicide Squad. The good one. The Suicide Squad? The second one. All right, nobody knows. All right. EIDR 1234. Right? And what about the director ID here? I have no idea. Right? What does that tell you about the order in which you need to insert things into this database? What do you need first? You need the director ID, right, of the director that directed that film. Okay, so before we actually create this film record, we need to get or insert a director record in order to have that director object to associate with that film. Right? So let's do that first instead of doing this. the way that I've designed this, let's go ahead and read the documentation here. This method returns a director with the given first name and last name in the given director D, loaded from the database. If no such director exists, it persists it to the database and then loads it. So this is, as the name describes, is if the director is already in the database, I don't want to create a new record. I just want to use that record. If the record does not exist in the database, then I want to create it, and then I also want to load it up at the same time so I can associate it with some other film. Right? So let's go ahead and write this method now, and then test it down here. Does anybody know who the director of Suicide Squad was? It was not YTD. It was somebody else. Was it James Gunn? Okay. So get or insert director. I need a director first. I get director D is equal to new director James Gunn. Two N's, right? I'll say that this is my key element here. Key. And then director D is equal to that. All right? So let's see if, and then I guess we can print it. Well, no, we're gonna get it back. So let's go ahead and system.out.println D just to make sure that it works here. All right, it's not actually going to work because we actually need to write this code. But what should my first step here be? Check to see if it's in the database. So that means I'm going to have to make a select query and select and find, is there a director named James Gunn already in my database? Seems to me we already did that, didn't we? Well, data loader dot get director by name. D dot get first name. D dot get last name. Right. Now you see why we wrote that, right? It's going to be very, very convenient. And director D or result, let's call it, is equal to this, and ultimately we're going to return that result. Return result. Did I make this private? Nope. Why are you... by name. Oh, okay, by name. I don't give it the first name and last name. I give it D. There we go. Now it's happy. What does this function, or what does this method return if it fails? Like if there is no such director with the name James Gunn, and there's not. Let's walk through that. In fact, I should have, what should I have done to begin with? Documentation, right? Retrieves a director from the database with based on their first name, last name. If no such director exists in the database, ... what do we end up doing? Now we're going to have to read our code to find out. So here's my result, and it's null. Right? I select everything from director. I shouldn't be doing that, but whatever. Right? And if I have a while statement here, then result ends up being a new director. If there are no results and this while loop never executes, what do we end up returning as a result? Whatever we initialized it to, which is null. So if no such director exists in the database, it returns null. There we go. And so now I can use that fact over here, right? If the result is null, oops, thinking C there, right, then we need to insert the record. To do, insert the record, and then reload it. Reload it to return it. ... Otherwise, if it's already in the database, do we need to even worry about it? No, we just loaded it up. Here you go. Here's your director, James Gunn. Okay. All right. So let's do the to-do now. Insert the record. We know that it doesn't exist already. Right? So now we need to insert a new director record. So my query is going to be string query, or insert director query, right? If you want to write it long like that. Is equal to, how do I insert a new director? Let's come back over here and describe director. What do I need for a director? Do I need the director ID? No, that's auto-incremented, taken care of by the database. But I do need at least a first name because it's, or a last name, excuse me, because it's not allowed to be null. And I will go ahead and do the first name even though it's allowed to be null. Right? So let's write that query down here first. So insert into director, first name, last name, values. And now when I bring it over to JDBC, what will I use? Parameterizations, right? Question mark, 2 of them. The indices will now be 1 and 2 respectively. So bring this over, and there's my query. Get rid of that end-line character there. That's not long enough to break up. That's pretty good. And then what I need to do is I need to prepare my statement. But first I need to make my connection. Right? So there's my URL, my username, my password. There's the connection stuff. Bring that over here. So make your connection. Again, cut, paste like this. Maybe look for a different pattern where you're making what's called a connection factory. That's responsible for storing the password, username, and URL in one place, and that will create connections for you. Right? Create the connection, prepare your statement, your query, right? And that's going to be prepared statement, PS, is equal to con.prepare statement, with my query. What was it? What would I call it? Insert director query. There we go. Now that only prepares the statement, right? Let's go ahead and import that from java.sql. There we go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put this all in one big try catch. No. Let's just do try here, right? And then catch. Cannot get data. There we go. All right. Remember, everything in SQL, in JDBC, has to be surrounded with a try catch. Everything ends up throwing an SQL exception here. How do you deal with it? You log an error message, and then you rethrow it as a runtime exception. You catch and release, because that's what checked exceptions are. Okay. I've prepared my statement. Now I need to set my parameters, right? ps.set. The first parameter here is going to be the first name. The second parameter is going to be the last name. ps.setString, and those are both strings. So the first one will be the director's first name. The second one will be a string, the director's last name. There. And then I execute my statement, ps.execute. Right? Except that, do I expect a result set back? If I'm putting something into the database, right? I'm saving something to the database. I'm not selecting anything out of the database. Right? So I'm not expecting a result set back. So what I do is I execute an update. Now wait a second, this is not an update statement, right? This was an insert statement. We have insert, update, and delete. Doesn't matter. All three of them write to the database in some way, right? All three of them in JDBC, you use execute update. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to load what we just persisted to the database. Right? In fact, let's go ahead and make sure that this works. Get or insert film director. Let's go ahead and execute this. And we'll see that James Gunn... oops, that's not what I wanted. Come on. I want to execute this one right here. There we go. We got back null because... because we were returning null still. We haven't taken care of all of it yet. But let's go ahead and take a look at every director. Select everything from director. And now we see James Gunn there with a director ID of 6. So now I can go ahead and produce a new director object, Pojo, plain old Java object, with the first name of James Gunn and a director ID of 6. But if I do that, I end up hard coding 6 all the time, right? So what I need to do is I need to now load the record you just saved, ... How do we do that? How did we do it if it was already existed? Get director by name. Right? So Let's go ahead and do that. Right. Result is equal to that. And make sure that you are going back and cleaning up your resources. This is something I should have cut and pasted along with everything else. Oops. Con.close. Looks like I forgot to do that. And save data. So close all your resources, and then you can load it up and return that result. Oh, there is no RS, but there is a PS. I'll go ahead and move it up there. There, since I'm done with it. You can collapse them all down into one big try-catch if you really want to, or you can go ahead and split it up if you need a little bit more fine-grained control. There we go. James Gunn 6. Right. Well, that works because it ends up getting loaded up over here. So let's go ahead and get rid of that record and start from scratch over here. Delete from director where director ID is equal to 6. I want to make sure that this data loading actually works. There we go. So it inserted a new James Gunn record because I got rid of the old record, and guess what? The next director ID here was 7. Great, now we can use that. Let me show you another way of doing this that will be useful for you in lab not this week, but next week. Right? So you could do it this way. I'll go ahead and leave that in there so that when this gets posted to GitHub, you'll see that that was the first solution. Alternative is I want to load the IDs of the newly inserted records. And to do that, there is a nice little way of doing it. Instead of preparing your statement, just the statement itself, you also give it another directive here called statement.return generated keys. Right? So not only do I want you to insert records, but I also want you to give me all the keys that you just inserted. If you insert 1 record, I want that 7 back. If you insert 5 records, I want the ID of the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one, etc. Right? And you can specify that by simply just using this other flag variable over here when you execute that update. Now, before you close it, you actually have to get those keys out. So get the generated keys, ... Right? That will be a result set, RS. In fact, I'll call it keys. Right? Is equal to, I think it's ps.getGenerated_keys. There we go. And I'm going to have to import this as well. There we go. And I'm only expecting 1 key back here because I only inserted 1 record. If I inserted 5 records, of course, I would put this into a while loop. So I'm just going to go ahead and go with keys.next, right? Because if it was unsuccessful, an SQL exception would have been thrown, and this part of the code never would have executed. Right? So rs.next to give you the first record. There's only 1 record. You're pointing before the first record, rs.next. Now I'm pointing at the one and only record that I expect. And I can get the key out of it. Int key, director ID is equal to keys.getInt. There we go. And it's the first one. Yep, there we go. I don't know what the name is. I don't care because I know that there's only 1 key being returned. Right? Now I can create a director object here. Result is equal to new director based on that director ID and the d.get first name and d.get last name. So 2 ways of doing this. By making a completely separate query, a completely different connection to the database, versus going ahead and getting the keys that out of the database. Let's make sure it works. Again, there's James Gunn there, but he is 7. Let's go ahead and get rid of him, so that we start fresh. Result is set here, and then it ends up getting returned down here after we've closed everything. And I should close rs.close. There we go. Oh, no, keys.close. There we go. Run this, and now we should, if it works, we should get back James Gunn 8, because that would have been the next value. Great. It works. Now that I've got this solution, I can use that solution in my insert film here, because I need a title, a director ID, and an EIDR, which I'll just make up. Right? So let's write some code here to ensure that that we can insert a film. So insert film. I need a new film, I guess. Film Suicide Squad is what we were working with. Square squad is equal to new film, and I need a, what do I need? I need an actual director object here, film ID and title. Right, there we go. So title, or film. No, wait. What do I need? Oh, okay. I'll go ahead and set that to null, the title and the director here. So null. Suicide Squad. Odd. Can't do this today. And then my director that directed that, James Gunn. Right? And then I can insert that film into the database here. Okay. And by the way, I can test that by coming back over here to Data Loader, running this again, and seeing if Suicide Squad ever ends up over here, directed by James Gunn. All right. All right. So, how do we go about writing this? We could check to see if it exists already, right? So we could load up a film with a particular title or something like that, with a particular EIDR or a particular film ID, and see if it already exists. Right? I don't want to go that far, though, right? I'm getting tired of writing CRUD, create, retrieve, update, and destroy. So let's just go ahead and insert this film. It doesn't matter if it's a duplicate or not, okay? What's my query going to be? Something that looks like this, right? String insert film query. Query is equal to that stuff. But of course, I'm not always going to have Suicide Squad. I'm not always going to have that EIDR, and the director ID will be different too. So there's my query. What are the same basic steps? I need to create my connection. I need to prepare my statement, execute my statement, and then process the results. Okay? So I'm going to do a lot more of cut and paste again. Right? Here's my connection. Yeah, we'll do it here. There's my connection. What else should I cut and paste? My cleanup code. And I'll do that over here in Data Loader. I'm going to steal all this code. And paste. There is no RS, but there will be a prepared statement eventually. So I'll leave that there. Right. So I've got my connection. Well, I guess I need my URL. Let's get rid of that. Get rid of that. I need my URL, my username, and my password. There we go. All right. So I've made my connection. I need to prepare my statement. So try and catch. Again, it gets tedious, but there are better ways of doing this, right? If you design your functions correctly, you should only have to do one thing once. Load up all of the films, load up all of the actors, and then associate them with another query or something like that, right? Cannot get data. There we go. Or cannot insert data. All right. Prepared statement PS is equal to new, or no, sorry, con.prepare statement with the insert film query. There we go. And now we should have, or if I put this outside of the try catch, it should work. Initialize it to null, and then set it in here. There's the pattern. Right? I have 3 parameters here to set now. So ps.set, that first parameter there corresponds to the title. So it's going to be set string. And what do I set it to? Well, whatever f.getTitle is. There we go. That second parameter is an EIDR. Do you remember what that is? What type that is? String, integer, what? It's a string. It's a varchar. Okay. So that'll be set string 2. And then, do we have support in our film object here for EIDRs? I don't see one. So option 1, go back and redesign your POJO, your plain old Java object. Option 2, give it some garbage value, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That's the quick and dirty solution here, just to make sure that this works, right? The real solution would, of course, go back here and redesign your object to have an EIDR. Or yet another solution would be to come back here and redesign your tables to not have an EIDR. Right? It all depends on what you want to do. Right? There should be, ideally, there should be a one-to-one connection between your tables and your Java objects, but there doesn't have to be. Right? If you're never going to display the EIDR, if you don't care about the EIDR, then so be it. Right? Don't design it that way. Right? But I do have to put it in here because it is a required field the way that I designed my database. The last one is the director ID. So set int 3 and f.get director .get director ID. There we go. Now I need to execute that insert statement. So ps.execute insert. There is no execute insert. What was it again? For insert, update, and destroy, it's all going to be update. Update. We're not expecting anything back. We don't care about the keys because this function ends up returning nothing. If we wanted to, we could, of course, redesign this function to return the film ID that was generated. But I already demonstrated that up here, how to do that. So I'll leave it like this. Execute, update, clean up your resources, and now it should be done. So let's go ahead and clear this out. Execute this. All right, it loads up James Gunn because I was still printing it up here, up here on line 110. But now let's go over here to data loader and see if that was successful. Suicide Squad should be in there. Nobody's starring in it yet, but it was directed by James Gunn. And there it is. Right. Now that was just the tip of the iceberg, right? If you want to do full CRUD, create, retrieve, update, and destroy, you need to do that 4 times for as many tables as you have, right? And this is why I suggested that you go with a single table inheritance strategy so that you don't have, instead of 1 table, you might have 7 tables, right? Times 4 functions. You don't have to write all the functions for your project. You just have to write the functions that you will find most useful. Load up all of the assets. Load up all of the accounts. Load up all the people. Make it look maybe like you're loading it up from instead of from a CSV file, make it look like you're loading up from a database instead. Right. Questions on JDBC? No? Then let's talk about best practices. Or conclude with best practices, I should say. Always use prepared statements. I didn't show you anything else. You might end up going with some tutorial out there. How do I do JDBC again? Instead of, for whatever reason, you're not rewatching the lecture or looking at the notes or whatever, never ever use tutorial code that uses a plain old statement. All right? Always use prepared statements because it protects you against injection attacks, SQL injection attacks in particular. So what does an SQL injection attack look like? So let me go ahead and bring this slide over here. So suppose that you, instead of using prepared statements, you use a regular old statement and string concatenation here. And you're just going to put in the last name and concatenate it and not worry about escaping it out, right? Well, first of all, there's a problem there because what happens when you try to query this with somebody's name whose name is O'Brien? O, an apostrophe, Brian. What's going to happen to your apostrophes here? There will be 1 extra apostrophe that hasn't been escaped. Invalid SQL. That's the least of your worries. What if somebody is putting some input into a form and they enter in as their last name the following string? A, apostrophe, semicolon, then drop table user. Right? What's the actual query that gets run? It looks something like this. Sure, I'll go ahead and select out your primary email from the user table. But then right after that, I'll go ahead and drop that table users, right? Or user, whatever. Right? Or another example. What if you go ahead and if you put this in here, then basically it'll evaluate to a tautology, something that is true, and you can execute whatever code you want. Right? So you end up allowing an outside user, just by simply filling in a web form, to completely dunk your database. Your user table is now gone. Right? That's what an SQL injection attack is. You are injecting SQL code into a regular string, and if you do not use a prepared statement, it won't escape this stuff. Right? If you use a prepared statement, it would end up escaping it out and not interpreting it as SQL. It would end up interpreting it just as a string literal. Right? And this goes all the way. I mean, this is a classical attack, so classic that there's an XKCD comic about it. This is your son's school. We're having some computer trouble. Did he break something? Yes. Did you name your son an SQL injection attack? Yes. Bobby Tables, we call him, and that means that they've completely destroyed their database, right? By entering that data in unsanitized. It's called sanitizing or scrubbing. You're sanitizing unclean, potentially dangerous input before you put it into your database. If you want to see what that looks like in practice, do the advanced activity in Lab 10. We do a combination of SQL and cross-site scripting attack by giving you this string to put into as an album title. And what you end up doing is you end up not inserting SQL, but you end up inserting HTML instead, which will end the rendering of the table, add a link that a naive user might say, oh, I'll click that, right? You can inject HTML into the database. When that gets rendered on the user side, it ends up rendering whatever HTML you want, right? And that's another nice little attack. Right? Unfortunately, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if it'll work if we can't get it the Eclipse issue resolved that we announced, right? That you're not able to get a preview working in Eclipse right now. If anybody's found a solution to that, or anybody's not affected by that, let us know, because we want the solution to announce to everybody. Right? All right. Best practice tip number 2, do not use wildcards. I use them at first for demonstration purposes. And certainly, it's perfectly fine to use wildcards in, say, MySQL workbench over here, if you just want a quick and dirty query. But the problem with using it in SQL, or in JDBC, excuse me, is that you end up wasting resources. If you end up pulling 10 columns and you only end up using 2, you've wasted resources by pulling all that stuff across the wire. It can get really bad if you store, say, images or media or something like that in your database, and you end up not using the image. You pull that entire 50 gig image or something out of the database, send it over the wire, and then just ignore it on the other end. Don't do it. Don't use wildcards. Be intentional. Enumerate your column, and when appropriate, use aliases. Okay? Finally, another one, close your resources. Again, I demonstrated this 2 weeks ago. What happens when you request, say, 35 connections? You'll get the first 30, and then that's it. You will get rejected, and it'll crash your program if you're not handling it correctly. Right? The real solution here is to use what's called a connection pool, which we won't get into. Don't store unencrypted sensitive data in your database, like, say, passwords, right? You're hearing it all the time that websites or whatever get attacked. They dump their database, and in that they've stored passwords. If they're unencrypted, then you've just gotten a whole bunch of passwords for a lot of users, right? Even if they're encrypted, though, you've still exposed a lot to the outside world, because hackers can now use what are called rainbow tables to look up common passwords, right? What's the most common password, by the way? Password, right? So what is a SHA-256 hash online? So if I cracked your database and I found that associated with your username was the password, this thing down here, right? All I have to do is look that up in a rainbow, what's called a rainbow table, a table of pre-computed common passwords. And these are all over the place. You can download the 10,000 most common passwords. Right? There. It's on Wikipedia, in fact, right? The 10,000 most common passwords. Download them all, pre-compute all these hashes, and then look them up in a reverse lookup table. Okay, there's their hash. Guess what their password was? Password. What's another most common? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right? Oh, Mordor. There we go. That caught my eye. Let's find out what that is. So if I cracked your database and I dumped it and I found that you had a hash like this, I know what your password is now. I can get into your account. Right? Whereas if you had used a more sophisticated method of using, say, PBK df2, there we go, password-based key derivation function number 2, then it would not be so easy. Right? To recompute this hash, this rainbow table would require a lot of extra work if you're using what's called a salt with it. This is all called hashing, and we like where have you heard the word hash before? Not hashtag, right? But kind of. Why is it called hashtag? Do you know? What is the verb hashing? Think hash browns. What are you doing? You're cutting things. So why is it the hashtag? Cut, right? Looks like a hash brown now, right? We eat hash browns, right? All right. Hopefully we still eat hash browns. They're good, especially with lots of ketchup and hot sauce. All right. So hashing, you like your hash to be tasty, so what do? You throw in a little bit of salt here. Instead of just having Mordor here, what I would do is I would throw in a randomly generated code, say, whatever, right, that is unpredictable and stored in the database. And now this will not appear in any sort of, and I'll just do a concatenation. And this will not appear in any sort of rainbow table. Right? This is a little bit more safe to store in your database. But the real solution is don't handle sensitive data at all. Let somebody else do it. Right? For example, let's see. When I go to a typical website, let's go to Strava because I know that it will log me out here. Right? What are your options? You can sign in with Facebook, with Google, with Apple. In other words, security is really, really hard, and it's really, really hard to get right. Let somebody else do it, right? Don't store passwords. Let somebody sign in with their Google credentials, and then you'll never store their password at all. You offload all of that to Google. Usually it's free, too, because these services want people to use their services, right? Finally, use a proper logging system. Let's go back to our code over here. Every time something went wrong, what did I end up doing? System.error.println, right? System.error.println. Everything ends up getting printed to the standard output. Nobody is sitting there 24/7 staring at the output. Right? But if something does go wrong, you want to know about it. If somebody logs into your system, you want to know about it. If somebody accesses a certain page, you want to know about it because then you're generating, ad data or something like that, right? So you do want to know about those things, but you don't want it to go to the standard output where it will just be thrown away. You want to use a proper logging system, for example, log4j. Let me show you how to do that since we have enough time. And it's worth bonus in your next assignment, right? Log4j. Download is what I want. So if you go to log4j, go with log4j2, right? You can download, say, a tarball of it, right? I think I've already got it included in the system, right? There we go. I've got log4j API jar and log4j core jar right here, okay? Now, I should have prepared better for this. Where is my Jdbc in the other section? There we go. We did completely different things, so let me go ahead and grab this. There we go. And ignore that. And now let's do it up here. Data loader. So what I want to do is I want to establish what's a logger for this particular class. Okay? And to do that, I simply create a logger and call it log. Since it's public and it's static and it's final, I'll just go ahead and all uppercase. Here's my log, or you can call it logger if you want. Logger, right? And it's going to log messages, information messages, warning messages, error messages. There are actually 5 different levels. The topmost level is going to be errors, because you always want to know about errors. Then there are warnings. Then there are, I think, info. And then there's trace. And then there's debug, right? So if you want to, you can have a bunch of debugging messages in your logs as well, right? And so when you deploy to a testing server or something like that, you can go ahead and generate every single piece of log message so that you can see that everything is working. Right? Or when you go out to a production server, now you just care about the errors. The time to debug is long gone if you're pushing this out to production, and so you'd shut those off. A proper logging system allows you to do that. Right? We're going to have to configure the logger. And this is the way that you configure. Usually what we would do is you would establish an XML file or what's called a properties file, which would be a completely separate file where you would put all your configuration information. But because we're not going to do that in this class, I'm showing you how to use the default configuration here. In fact, it's called the default configuration. Right? And we're going to set the root level here to info. We want to do info and above. So info, warnings and error messages. Okay. Once we do that, we can go ahead and instead of going to the system.error or the system output, we can go ahead and go with the logger, log.error. Right. Ignore all that error. Right. And then my message, and then I will go ahead and put in that exception as well. It will never, now the default configuration here ends up printing to the standard output, but that's just because it's the default. You can change this so that it will output to a file. You can change this so that it will shoot off an email to an administrator in the event of an error. You can change it so that it writes to a database so that you can query out your own log messages if you want to. There are lots of ways that you can do this. If it goes to a simple file, then you can also configure it so that it only keeps the last 10 days of logs, right? And then on day 11, it deletes the oldest one and then starts a new day, right? You can do it so that it keeps the last 10 files, and there's a limit, so 1 megabyte per file or something. It fills up this file, it fills up this file, fills up this file, so that you're only ever spending at most 10 megabytes on your log system, right? There are lots of things that you can do with this, but that you cannot do with just system.error or system.out. Right? I'm just showing you the default configuration here, though. Right? There's an error. What else? Anytime that you see system.error, we will replace it with log.error. Cannot get resources for some reason. There we go. We still want to throw the exception because we want it to be, fatal. We can also log info messages. So let me come down here to the main, log.info, right? And here I'll just put in a regular old message, starting the main method, ... Right? Let's go to get director by ID here. Oh, that's in a different class, right? I don't want to do that. So I'll just go ahead and put it here. I'll go ahead and put it here. Oh wait, where am I? Yeah, I'm in here. I'm in data loader. So get director ID. Oh, I'm in the same class. Never mind. Loading director with ID, and then you can concatenate director ID. Concatenate. There's no concatenation issues here, right? There we go. Or maybe it's debug. Instead of info. Right? Down here, I'll say success. Success with director ID equals this. And here I will go ahead and put in info. Right? So debug, info, error. There's also warning, log.warn. Right? There's also trace. I forget if that's above or below debug. But you can use a proper logging system here to do whatever you want, right? Let's go ahead and run this. And you see what it looks like now, starting the main method here, right? It's still running. I wonder why it's running. There we go. Finally, it was able to make the connection to the database. But see all those logs there? Info, success with director ID 1, success with director ID 1. Right? It was loaded up twice. Success with director ID 1, blah, 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 right? All of that was info. What if we had a bad password? Get director by ID. What's that going to look like now? There. Access denied. There's my password there. And there was the info message. And then here's the error log message. Right? Cannot get connection. Do I have a log? Oh, no, I don't. So log.error cannot get connection. E. Right? And maybe you can also say using password plus password. There we go. Let's try this again. There. Cannot get connection using password blah, 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 blah. Right? Now, of course, that means that there are going to be passwords in your log files, and hopefully you're the only one that has access to those log files. Right? Never log information like user C. Burke logged in with using password 1234, right? I have seen systems that do that before, and now instead of breaking into the database, all they have to do is break into the regular system and steal your logs and grep out all the passwords, right? So don't do that either. Right? I'm just showing this to you for demonstration purposes, though. Right? At this point, you can steal that password and start screwing up my database, but I can just reset it. Right? Questions? All right, so again, using a proper log system like Log4j is going to be worth extra credit, not on the one due this Friday, but the next phase, when you load stuff up from the database. And then the next phase will be putting stuff into your database. Okay? No questions? Then what we'll do is we'll wrap up the first half of this course on Thursday. Yeah, Thursday. Talking about multi-tier architecture and just general software development, software engineering, whatever you want to call it. Dealing with, at the end of it, I usually conclude that a software developer, software engineer, or computer scientist, whatever you want to call yourself, you have to be everything. Sometimes you have to be a lawyer. Sometimes you have to be a diplomat. Sometimes you have to be a communicator, right? The amount of coding that you actually do in a job and that you get in industry might only be 30, 40, 50% of your time, right? What are you doing with the other 50, 60, 70% of your time, right? So we'll talk about that on Thursday. Otherwise, after that, this is week 9. We have 6 weeks left, right? After this week, all right? That's the second half of this course, and that's going to be data structures and algorithms. We'll start talking about lists and list-based data structures, stacks, queues. We'll then get into algorithms, algorithm analysis, trees and tree-based data structures, and the rest of this course. All right? So this Thursday will be basically the halfway point as far as topics are concerned. All right. Have a good rest of your day.